Welcome everybody to this scrutiny meeting on Thursday the 12th, sorry, not 12th of February, where is it? 24th of April, 23rd of April. Declarations of interest. Anybody got any? Steve?
No, I haven't got a declaration of interest, but I've got to go just before 12:30 because I have a bus to do. And if we're lucky enough still to be here at 3 o'clock, I'm going to have to go just before 3 as well.
Okay, right, thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting. Anybody got anything to say? No? Could we have a proposer, please? Councillor Blackwell and a seconder. Councillor Dean, all those in favour? Thank you. I have no urgent items. Right, we can start with the fire and rescue report now because we're all here. So, Phil, would you like to introduce this, please?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. So, Chair and members, I'm pleased to introduce this report, which I'm presenting following the decision taken by members in November 2025 to approve the extension to the 2023 to 26 Community Risk Management Plan. The purpose of this report, alongside the accompanying interim CRMP, is to provide assurance on the progress made against the original CRMP priorities and to set out a clear and transparent position on delivery to date. The paper acknowledges that during the lifetime of the 2023 to 26 CRMP, the service experienced capacity challenges which impacted on our ability to complete some elements of the plan within the original timescales. I want to be clear that these challenges were recognised, understood and have now been addressed. Where activity has not been progressed as intended, this report explains the reasons for that and avoids presenting progress in a way that lacks honesty or realism. Importantly, this paper does not simply look backwards. It sets out how the outstanding elements of the CRMP will be taken forward, how they align with current risk, and how delivery will be supported by improved capacity, governance and oversight. The interim CRMP provides a bridge between the original plan and our next CRMP, ensuring continuity of risk management and strategic intent. I would ask members to see this paper both as an update and as a reassurance. It demonstrates learning, transparency and a renewed focus on delivery. I invite members to scrutinise the report and its appendices, offer any observations and consider endorsing its contents for recommendation to full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Any questions? Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Phil, for the report. I do just have a few questions. Do you want them all at once or one at a time?
Oh, can we go one at a time, please?
Yeah, of course. So on sort of assurance of outstanding risks, obviously the report highlights that some commitments, particularly around protection, data quality and the risk register, remain incomplete. So what level of risk does this pose to the public and how are you assuring yourself that these gaps are being actively managed?
Okay, so we've established clear and I think practical governance framework to ensure effective oversight of the delivery. We have internal governance arrangements, and that includes routine management monitoring, performance review processes, and quarterly oversight of the delegated functions, including those delivered under our Section 101 arrangements. So this ensures that our progress is continually assessed, both at the operational and at the strategic level. If any risks or delays are identified, these will be formally escalated through exception reporting within the Council's governance framework, and this ensures that there's transparency and, importantly, it provides members with the opportunity to scrutinise, challenge and, where necessary, influence the direction or prioritisation of our activity.
Brilliant, thank you. And on sort of Section 101 and the relationship with Cornwall and sort of partnership, accountability, that sort of thing, given the reliance on Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service for protection functions, how do you ensure accountability and performance under these arrangements, and how are members kept cited on this?
Okay, so just to give you a little outline on it, so our protection function, because fire protection itself is quite a specialist area, we do use Cornwall Fire and Rescue and their specialist protection officers to do our regulatory enforcement. So that operates under under a service level agreement, which clearly defines the roles, responsibilities, and the expected standards of performance. So accountability is maintained through a structured programme of engagement. We have tactical quarterly meetings and regular strategic discussions between senior officers as well. And this gives us oversight of performance, enables us to identify and manage any risk if it comes up, and then to make sure that our arrangements are effective and proportionate based on the local needs. As part of our interim CRMP, further work is being undertaken to strengthen the reporting mechanisms and to enhance clarity around the delegated responsibilities. And this will provide improved transparency and assurance to members. And that will include a protection strategy that clearly outlines how we're going to take this forward.
Brilliant, thank you. In terms of sort of evidencing things to do with the CRMP, how do you measure whether the CRMP is actually reducing risk in our communities, particularly given the small incident numbers on the islands?
So we do recognise the importance of demonstrating the effectiveness of the CRMP, and I'm really keen to make sure that it's not just a document, it is the way that we operate. So given the unique context of the islands, our small population and low incident volumes, we've adopted a practical approach to performance management. So whilst incident data and trends are monitored, they are supplemented by a much broader range of indicators to provide more meaningful assessment of our impact, something that truly shows what we do. So that includes the extent to which prevention activity is targeted to those most vulnerable to risk, the outcomes from any safeguarding activity and any multi-agency interventions, getting feedback from our partners, stakeholders and the community, our findings from audits, inspections and our operational assurance processes, and this is perhaps one of our most important and useful ones, evaluation of our community engagement and prevention initiatives. So that enables us to have a much more comprehensive and realistic understanding of the risk and the effectiveness of our work, beyond just reliance on incident numbers alone, which may work for other services but certainly wouldn't work for us.
Brilliant, thank you. And last one from me. What assurance can you give that the work planned for this interim year, such as the risk register and updated strategies, will be completed in time to inform a robust 2027 to 2032 CRMP?
So we've identified within the report a small number of areas, specifically in relation to data quality and methodology that we know we have made the progress on. But I just want to assure members that that doesn't mean that we're not actively managing the risk around that. So over the interim CRMP, we've specifically designed it to be in a structured and time-bound framework, so that we complete the work within that timescale. Progress will be subject to ongoing internal scrutiny, and I'm satisfied that we have the right oversight and mitigation in place to manage any residual risk in that period. One of the reasons I wanted to come to members today was to really show, and I hope that I've presented in a way that says this is what we said we'd do, this is what we've achieved, but also to acknowledge there are areas where we've yet to achieve, but I've highlighted how we're going to achieve that in that 1 year period. So hopefully that will give members a reassurance.
Brilliant. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Anybody else got any questions? Councillor Dean.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple. One, we've got I think his title is a community safety officer. Is that John's title?
That's correct.
I just wondered if you could just let us know how that's going, because that was quite exciting and it sounds like it's going quite well. So yeah, just some feedback on that new role, please.
Yeah, certainly. So John's role is twofold, really. So partly it's around operational support around the off islands, and it was recognised that Kevin's role was it was very difficult to achieve in the time that he had, and also our community safety work. A lot of that was being delivered by airport fire crews, and that was under pressure as well. And it was an area that was picked up by His Majesty's Inspectorate. So we were very glad to be able to provide or create John's position, and the bulk of his work at the moment is around that community safety work. So he's done an incredible number. I wish I had the numbers in front of me, Councillor Dean, but an incredible number of home safety visits, many of which have identified some significant risks in homes, and he's been able to do work to help mitigate that, not only with fitting smoke alarms but also with general advice. He's been fully involved with some activities around road safety for young people, and that was done in conjunction with the police. And he's very quickly brought into place some of that reassurance work that we needed. So some of the work to make sure that what we believe we're doing is being done by getting feedback from those people that we go out and meet, and that's been extremely positive. And also working alongside the comms team at the council as well, he's significantly increased the work that we do on our social media posts, which has had a massive spread. Considering the population of the Isles of Scilly, there are clearly a lot of people that are interested in what we do elsewhere as well, because we're talking about over 40,000 people actually looking at some of the posts that we put up on social media. So we're very pleased with the work that he's done.
Good. That's good to. I'd heard kind of anecdotally that he was doing a great job, so it's really good to hear from you that he is doing a really great job. So that's good stuff. I've got one kind of major concern, which is the capital replacement programme. It's you know, we know that money is tight with the council. I just wondered if there was a budget in place for that, and if not, if that's something that you've got to work on for the, you know, for next year's plan.
So in terms of our capital, I think we're very prudent in the way that we operate. I think a good example of that is the fire engine that we have on St Mary's was bought second hand. It had been in use with a large fire service for many years. If we were to go and buy a brand new fire appliance, it would cost in the region of about £250,000. We spent less than I think probably about 10% of that on an appliance which we got a guarantee from the supplier on, which has got plenty of life in it for our needs, and which the crew very much value. So I think that's an example of how we are prudent with our funding. We've got a capital replacement programme in place. I want to do more work on that. I want it to be a bit more defined. We've identified some areas that do need investment, but at this time we're in a very fortunate position that the council's capital funding that we were granted, I think 2 years ago, puts us in a good and realistic position moving forward.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions from anybody? Thank you. We'll take the recommendations then. Recommendation 1, that members, having scrutinised the information provided in the report and appendices, make such observations as they consider appropriate and endorse the contents of the Isles of Scilly Fire and Rescue Service Community Risk Management Plan 2023 to 2026, Progress Report and Interim Year Extension. Recommendation 2, that members recommend that full council consider any observations made by this committee under recommendation 1 above and approve the contents of the Isles of Scilly Fire and Rescue Service Community Risk Management Plan 2023 to 2026, Progress Report and Interim Year Extension. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Sims, seconder. Councillor Dean. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Once again, good report, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you. We'll go on to agenda item 5, Learn Scilly Annual Update. Joe, you want to? Do you want to present the report, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So this report provides an annual update on the work of Learn Scilly and the contribution it continues to make to both our council employees and the wider community. It outlines how the service is identifying and responding to local learning and skills needs, the impact of our provision, and how we are aligning the wider strategic priorities such as the Local Skills Improvement Plan and the Get Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Working Plan. Members are invited to note the progress made, the positive outcomes achieved within a small and geographically unique context, and the areas identified for further development. Our Learning Development and Skills Manager, Helena, is here with me today, and we'd both be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Joe. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joe, for the report. Again, it's excellent to see the work that's been going on. A very thorough report. And good to see that we're engaging both with the community and local employers. I just wanted to check a couple of things. You've mentioned about the adult schools core budget not being in place now, and that the service will offer individual support where possible.
Yeah.
Is there a process that learners can engage with you if they want to do an online academic course in place?
So do you mean if anybody needed to do basic
Basic
English or
skills,
maths and
yeah.
how they would go about doing
Yeah.
that? Yeah, so I mean we sort of, in all of our promotion, we advertise that it is something that we can either deliver or support people with. Yeah, it's mainly sort of through our probation that people know that they can come to us, and then once they do come to us, then we will sort of work with them to see what support it is that they need, and then depending on what support it is that they need, then we'll put something in place. The fact that we don't have the adult skills budget to deliver those qualifications now could potentially be an issue if we have somebody who needs those qualifications, but the numbers are so small and have diminished quite a lot over the last few years. We will just work with individuals as and when they come to us and support them where we can. So we can support them through the funding that we have, but we don't have additional funding to do that.
Okay, thank you. A second question for you, please. You put in the report that your engagement visits, especially the ones off island, were successful. You gathered valuable feedback, and you mentioned about particularly around developing remote and digital delivery. I was wondering if you could share what some of that feedback was with us, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the feedback from off-island, the off-island communities, was access to, being able to come down to St Mary's to attend the courses that we put on. And obviously, boating is expensive. We do have some funding that can support with that. But I think we've probably got a bit of work to do to promote the fact that we do have some money that can support that, because not everybody was aware of that. Also about the timings of boats and sort of the days of the week. So Saturday was an example of where that might be a better day for us to put courses on, because there are more boats on a Saturday, and Thursdays as well. So it was around that, and also I think around us sort of communicating with a group of off-islanders rather than us communicating individually with people on each island. So I think that's something that we can work on. We haven't sort of put anything in place around any kind of digital access yet, because we just haven't had the chance to really properly think about it. But that's certainly something that we will look at. We did ask, we had a little questionnaire, and we did ask if people would be happy with it, if they'd want to learn in that way, and quite a few of them said that they would. So I think it's just a case we've got a bit more work to do around that to work out what that might look like and what we can realistically do.
Thank you, that sounds very positive. One last question for you. It's very good to see in the report, obviously, that the council itself is taking a lead on apprenticeships, so the amount of apprenticeship places are in place. And obviously your engagement with local employers is going well, with 9 employers or so engaged. How many of those 9 employers have actually started apprenticeships, do you know?
So the group of employers that we have, they're a bit of a mixture. So some have already delivered apprenticeships within their organisations. For example, Tresco Estate, they are quite experienced in that. There might be some others who are literally just come along to the forum to kind of just get a bit of an idea of what it's all about and kind of learn from each other. So it's a real mixed bag, but actually a really useful space for everybody to be sharing those experiences with those who are a bit more experienced in delivering apprenticeships, with those who perhaps just finding out about first steps.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else got any question? Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you. Stuart stole my question about apprenticeships, so I'll just say thank you for the report. It must be quite difficult to self-assess, but the feedback from learners speaks volumes. So I'll be happy to propose recommendations. Councillor Dean.
I think.
Oh, sorry, Councillor White.
I just want to say thank you for the report and again for the additional engagement with the off-island communities in the last year. And it's really good to see actually that off-island participation has already risen since the last annual report. I know we're getting a meeting in the book soon, so we can talk about off-island delivery, so I'm looking forward to that. And I'll just say how much we value and appreciate the service. I think it's so important in our community to have this in place, so thank you.
Councillor Dean.
Yeah, I'd endorse all that. It's great report. It's nice to have some good news, some positive news for once. I've just got one kind of possible concern, is you've got in here about Learning Hub changing to Calidus. Is that a potential disaster area, or are we happy about that? Is there any cost involved? Is it?
As far as we're aware, the cost shouldn't be any different from what it will be under the same service level agreement. We're still waiting. It's still quite early days, so the implementation I think is planned for October. From what we've seen, it looks a million times better than what we've got. But I think the plan is to, obviously, with any kind of new system, update, new software, it will be baby steps. But in terms of the cost and the service that we are receiving, we work really closely with the Cornwall Learning and Development team. They've kind of kept us updated the whole way along. It's going to be a big piece of work, and it will be a big project. But I think in the long run, it should be a really positive one. So we're quite excited about it.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks.
Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, endorse everything everyone said. Just a question about hours and numbers. To me, am I reading it right? Sort of the learning hours are down from last year. And I was just wondering about what do you think that is, and is that going to affect the service and the delivery in the future? And how do you keep, your plan to keep the service, the valuable service that it is, relevant and still worthwhile whilst even numbers decrease?
Yeah, we do tend to see sort of peaks and troughs, and it will depend within each year, as to what's been delivered within that year. So it potentially could be because we might have done a load of staff training in one year, so obviously then the numbers spike and then go down again. Obviously, we want to keep the number of courses that we deliver and the number of people that we engage with and the number of learning hours, therefore, high. But we don't want to just sort of concentrate on that sort of data and those figures, because we do want to make sure that what we're delivering is what people want and what is needed. And if that means that actually delivering less to do more, potentially. What I'm saying is if we're delivering more valuable stuff, then that's kind of more important. And the Skills Funding Agency or the DFE are not necessarily looking at they will look at the whole thing holistically. They're not just going to look at our numbers and say, you're not doing very well. They will look at the whole thing holistically, and they understand that, as long as we're delivering what's required within the community, then that's okay. But we do need to make sure that we do keep the numbers up there, because.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you very much.
Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that obviously numbers are important, but you can get something like a benefit change with family benefit and the qualifications for some of the benefits changing, where because it's so important to a small number of people, numbers are not necessarily as relevant. We can't always explain all of that in every report, otherwise we land up with reports that are like a London telephone directory. So I think it's just worth making the point. I know we all know that, but I think it's worth just mentioning it, really just for anyone who's reading the report from outside, because they might think, why on earth are we running this course for this small number of people? And the answer is, for those small number of people, it makes a big financial difference.
Thank you. Any more questions? I would like to take the recommendations that members of the Scrutiny Committee endorse the contents of this report and appendices and recognise the positive impact and influence of the work undertaken by the Learn Silly service. That members, having scrutinised the information provided in the report and appendices, make such observations as they consider appropriate, with a view to informing the completion of the next self-assessment. I've already had a proposer by Councillor Blackwell. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Nixon. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Always a pleasure to see you here. And thank you for a well-written report, a lot of information. Particularly pleased to see the level of apprenticeships being offered, and hopefully this area can be grown again. See you next time. Thank you very much. And Helena, of course, as well. Thank you. Now we come on to agenda item 6, which is an update on the Ofsted monitoring visit, which will be presented by Sue Butcher. Joel, do you want to come and sit at the table?
Thank you, Chair. So this is outlining the outcome from the recent Ofsted monitoring visit, which took place on the 10th and 11th of March earlier this year. So we've set out Ofsted's findings below in the report, and the full summary of their findings in terms of the letter that they sent is also included. The letter was embargoed up until the 13th of this month. However, we had done a members briefing before that. So I acknowledge that members will find the outcome of the monitoring visit as a disappointment, and in that the overall improvement trajectory was impeded by a decline in quality and effectiveness of social work practice and management oversight. The key safeguarding partners, however, had remained engaged in the improvement process, but there has been and remains actually some scepticism in terms of how long I'm going to stay in role, and particularly because there have been so many directors of children's services in the last few years, and I hope that in time that will move away, as I've got no plans to go anywhere just at the moment, unless of course you tell me. I don't know. However, leadership stability and improved resource capacity and practice improvements were following the appointment as I came into post at the very beginning of March. So Ofsted, the Ofsted monitoring visit was something of a baptism of fire. However, it has given me a really strong insight into practice and from where I need to build. So we've done quite a lot of work on the improvement plan itself, but there's also been, as referenced in point 6, a recent needs analysis and the development of a good children and young people's plan. It is a really good plan. I'm very impressed with it, and I've seldom seen better in authorities that I've worked in. And what we need to do is to merge that with the improvement plan so that we're actually working on the two plans side by side. One of the great things that Ofsted are impressed with is that you know yourself. That is absolutely crucial in terms of Ofsted. If you know yourself, even if your practice is poor, it gives you a foundation from which to be able to improve. And I think that the Children and Young People's Plan does that, and I think it was something that Ofsted really appreciated. However, we have got to know ourselves better in terms of the level from which we need to improve. There are some developments. We have now appointed a permanent head of children's services who's going to be working full-time from the island. So we do now have a permanent DCS. We do now have a permanent head of service. We also, and we of course have family support workers who live on the island. I would also say that we have two very committed social workers. They are experienced. They are they are committed to staying. One person is looking at whether permanency might be an option, and the other one has said, the other social worker is very clear that she's not going anywhere in the short term and is here to get us through positively through a good inspection. So I think there's a level of permanence which I hope will reassure members. We've also got an appointment of a permanent adult social care worker who will be relocating to the island in mid-May. You might wonder why I've put that in the report when we're talking about children. However, I'm very much striving to bring adults and children's services together as under one directorate, because I think that that brings resilience into the service. Because social work is, after all, a generic profession, and risk can be recognised. But it also means that if people need to accompany a visit, we've just got that bit of extra flexibility, and transferable skills are important. In terms of governance and reporting mechanisms, we need to improve our scorecard, our performance indicators. We've had very limited performance information, and this has been improving, and I've been working with our quality assurance, our data colleague, in terms of doing that. That is something that we've been criticised for, including by our improvement advisor. She is saying, and she has said to me very clearly, how do you know yourself if you haven't got the scores on the doors, as it were, to tell you that? And the quality assurance framework, I think, had weakened recently. And I wasn't impressed with the quality of the audits that went to Ofsted this time. There are particular reasons for that in terms of some of the issues that Ofsted mentioned that happened over the Christmas period. However, what I have done is commissioned, and it's just starting, a root and branch audit of our children's case files, all of the open case files, and going back now to September, looking at some of the case files that have closed recently, so that I can be assured of the robustness of those closure decisions. The audit that I've commissioned is going to be a bit brutal, I think. It's a very, this person that we've commissioned, I know from other authorities, will deliver it as it is. There will be no, in any way, any positivity where it isn't, but there will be positivity where it is. I've taken some pains to brief staff on Ofsted's findings, and we had a directorate on-site, on-site away day, if that makes sense, where we looked at, well, I want to bring staff along with us. I want staff to know what their part is in the improvement journey. And we had some really good sessions on where do we need to improve services? What's your role? So if you're doing, an obvious example really is, the brilliant splash tots. How is that improving the lives of children on the area? And can we actually explain that? Can we evidence it? I think my colleagues in children's services and adult services are fed up with me saying impact and evidence, because there's good stuff going on, I can see it, but it's not evidenced. And if it isn't evidenced, it hasn't happened, or I don't know if it's happened. And what's the impact been? So it's about saying, you've done that, it's beautiful, but what difference has it made? And sometimes it's really obvious what difference it's made, but how do I, Ofsted want the evidence. They want to see that it's happened and that it's written down in it and it's there. So I think there's some disappointment also, although not explicitly referenced here, in that I've rebased the children's, the improvement plan. And again, I've been a little bit, I suppose, harsh in some ways, in that if I can't find the evidence, it hasn't happened. So some things have returned to red, where they might have previously been amber, or there might be something that, I saw a couple of, for example, and again, please don't think this is any criticism of any individual. This is about systems and processes. Where something says there's a draft report available, that's not good enough. It needs to be a full report available. So from those points of things, so I've rebased it, but I think there is, people are now, I think, off looking at where we can find the evidence to show that things have happened, and not just that anecdotal evidence. Of course, we also need to be really mindful of the fact, as I've as mentioned on point 12, that as well as delivering an improvement journey, we are also in the process of delivering social care reforms. And when Ofsted come to do their full inspection, they will look at our progress through the lens of the social care reforms. So there's a double journey happening here in many ways. And we need to make sure that we've got the systems and processes in place to show that we've been doing both together. So we've got really the Children and Young People's Plan, we've got the Improvement Plan, and we've got the plan to deliver the social care reforms. They need to be merged so that they have their own individualities, but they also are one improvement journey. And I've also, we're now hot desking down at Calm Guarvel, and that's not been without its challenges, but actually it's now really working out well because everybody is there sharing skills, sharing expertise, sharing information, obviously in the appropriate way, information about families. And we are strengthening families. That is our motto or our vision, and I think we should be promoting that more. But also, is it now strengthening families with a generational approach or some better phraseology around that? So that's it really. I think that we are expecting an Ofsted full inspection. I would say, if I was a betting woman, I would say October, but certainly in the autumn. It will not happen before then because the Ofsted inspector was very clear that their summer schedule has been sorted. So that's where we are really. So I hope that you will see that although the findings were disappointing, that things are already in place to be able to put things into a much better place. However, it isn't just about, this for me is very much about systems and processes, because what we can't have, as has happened, when one person goes, the knowledge goes with them. We need to make sure we've got the systems and processes in place so that when so that you know what to do, because it's laid down in practice standards, it's laid down in processes and procedures. Everybody's familiar with the working together guidance, for example. And so that's in place to support people because it's very clear that although, we may not have any looked after children, we may not have any care leavers, but we have to have a care leavers offer because you don't know when a care leaver might come onto the island. You don't know that if a family moves in, we might have to take a child into our care. And what we don't want to be doing is frantically flicking through books to make sure that we know what we're doing. So we need to provide a full service here on the Isles of Scilly. There's some bits of that we need to embed. For example, a kinship carers offer and an early help offer. I think if there's one thing that we need to move on really quickly is bringing together all of the early help and preventative work that we've got and the community fabulously provides into one early help offer. So hopefully I've talked through the report, but also given you some additional information around the points that are there, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Sue. Joel, would you like to say anything first as lead member for children?
Yeah, I've got some notes and thoughts here. First of all, I'd like to welcome you, Sue. It's been many years since the council has had a permanent, full-time employed Director of Children and Adult Services. As you alluded to, we've had a host of interim staff who've been here for various lengths of time. So to have some continuity and some consistency and away from that sort of agency model is really positive. And as you said, we welcome a head of service to Children's Services in the next 10 working days or so. So again,
something along those lines. I'm very excited.
So I think that's certainly a positive step for us to take. Again, I'd echo your comments. The contents of the Ofsted letter are both disappointing and frustrating. They identify significant decline since our previous monitoring visit last autumn. Clear weaknesses in quality of practice, quality assurance and performance management. And also, you also said it's likely to be our last monitoring visit before our full inspection. So there's a huge amount to be done in a short space of time. So that sort of focuses the mind and puts pressure on you. You use the terms, I think, being harsh and brutal. Please do. Please keep being harsh and brutal. I don't think we can afford the next 4 or 5 months to be anything but really productive for us. We had Improvement Board on Tuesday, which brings together partners to look at some of the work that you've just been talking about. We went through the Ofsted report. So I thought it would just be useful for scrutiny members to sort of hear about what we were discussing, and you can perhaps then explore in more detail if you wish to. So I was wanting assurance that the fundamentals of social work practice are being undertaken and also embedded. Again, we've had changes with social workers over time, and that's never helpful. What is being done to improve quality assurance? How is performance management now being structured? How is data being used to evaluate performance and also help us predict future demand? We spoke a lot about outcomes. What outcomes have been identified? Do we know what difference they're making? For all the work we're doing, for all the sort of cogs we're turning, what are we actually generating in terms of positive outcomes for children, young people and families? What lessons have been learned from the decline in service between last autumn and the inspection earlier this year? Are we assured that systems and processes, you talked about systems and processes, are we assured systems and processes are embedded and being followed? From what I could see around the Christmas time, the systems and processes were there, they just weren't being followed, which sort of led to some of that decline. So again, it's making sure that's embedded. And I think probably the biggest risk for me, and we're going to be having conversations with the Department for Education on Friday, what can you and what can partners do to assure us that we are a sustainable and viable service with capacity to deliver the improvements required at the pace needed? I'm expecting there's going to be further discussions around that on Friday. So in short, we have a huge amount to do to address the Ofsted concerns. Parallel to that, I'm very conscious we're going to have a SEND inspection coming up, conscious of also the transition work you're talking about. That whole sort of bigger picture of work around children's services is crucial. So I think I'll just leave it there for now. But those were the sorts of things we touched on in improvement board. It's up to scrutiny whether they wish to go any deeper on that.
Thank you very much, Joel. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. Lots of stuff there, Joel. Thank you. And Sue, thank you very much for the report and the honest appraisal of the letter. I think can't reiterate how disappointed we are with the outcome of this report. There's been online, there's been dismay at the letter, and I think we reflect that as members as well. So my question is, well, it's two-pronged really. Can we do it? And how are you going to assure us that it's being done? We've been sat in this room before with the improvement plan, like you said, saying everything's moving forward, everything's looking good. We've got the full Ofsted in, 6 months' time? How are we as members going to be assured that you guys are carrying out and making effective and impactful changes to practice?
Thank you. Can we do it? I think so. Can I assure you that we can do it? No, but I can say that there's a lot of passion and ambition to get it right. And I certainly am, when I'm talking to my teams, and that includes adults, there is a determination to get there. And I think that if you've got that, then you are certainly on a really good, you're in a good place. Out of the inspection, it also says that, it says that there are good relationships with children. And I think we mustn't negate that, because if you've got good relationships with children, then you have a really strong building block to build from. I think we will need the support of members, which I know we've got. And I think that there will also be, we've got quite good partnerships. We need to build on some of those because we can't do it alone. I mean, social work is a partnership profession, as it were. So I think we have a good chance. I think we have a good chance of being requires improvement. I think we have some chance of being good. But what I also don't want to be too absolutely honest with you is just push like individual practice. We must get the systems in place. We must get the processes in place. So because they will fundamentally underpin practice improvement. I could sit the social workers in a hot house every day and watch what they're doing every day and make sure they're talking to, children every day, but that doesn't fundamentally improve practice. Because what I'm sure the DFE will ask us on Friday is how sustainable are you? Because what they also will not want to see is, a good, well, of course they'll want to see a good in the autumn, but they won't want to see that slip away next time they have an annual engagement meeting. So they will want to know that there are those systems. And indeed, as Joel says, that those systems are being followed, because that can happen. That obviously that happened over the Christmas period. Is it being done? I've set out two things. The Department of Education tomorrow, in the meeting that Joel's referenced, will be asking me, we will be asking Joel and Russell around sustainability, I think, and when we're talking about, I will be talking about what's already happened and what my roadmap is between now and October and beyond. And I suppose it bears saying here that I'm, as a permanent employee, I will be working through Ofsted almost whatever the results say. So I think, is it being done? Well, you've heard me talking about rebasing the plan. You've heard me talking about the audits. You've heard me talking about the scorecard. So they are all things that need to be in place and before we can really see an impact in practice. I also think I've bored people rigid with the words impact and evidence, because, as I say, some of it is being done, but we're not writing it down. So those are the first things for me, looking at where we actually are and then looking what the evidence is to improve it. So, for example, the improvement plan is showing lots of red now. It wasn't before, but it is now. But I'm pretty sure that if people, look in their drawers and on the X drive, that's X files, isn't it? Y drive, that, there is evidence in there, but where is it? It's no good, it's no good if we haven't got it. So is it being done? Yes. We need to make sure we keep the pace going. We have to remember that we've got an August when, things can traditionally slow down a bit. So we need to make sure we keep that impact going through the August period. So it is doable and it is being done.
And how are we as members going to be assured along that process? Because we've got one meeting now. Is this coming back to, and you've got the improvement board as well, but is the wider membership going to see that improvement? Because we've seen the improvement plan before. Do we need to see it again at some point? Or I'm asking your opinion on this, so I haven't got.
I welcome support and welcome scrutiny, and I'm willing to brief members on the improvement plan if that's acceptable. But also Joel sits on the improvement board, as does Russell, so there is feedback that can happen there. I think one of the ways that you can, well, obviously you can be assured by holding me to account and looking at the improvement plan, but remembering also that I'm being held to account by the improvement advisor. So if the improvement advisor will be writing her report to the minister by the end of May, so that will very clearly show you, and she's very pragmatic. That will lay out for you where we are and what we're doing. But if there are things I'm more than happy to be transparent about the progress, because then you can help me, and I know that every member that I've met has offered support and welcome discussion. So I will. My pledge to you is transparency.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have another meeting in June that we'll probably request how the improvement board is going on. We'll let you know about that.
Can I just say, I think it's worth saying we're now increasing improvement boards to monthly, so we can probably work out a mechanism that allows us to share papers which are going to improvement board on a monthly basis with members and find a schedule of briefings and bring it to scrutiny to make sure that's not too challenging to work that out.
Okay.
We can bring some of the papers from the improvement board to scrutiny,
Yes.
if that's helpful.
I think that would be
That would be-
helpful.
yeah.
Any more questions?
I'm just
Councillor
thinking,
Blackwell.
yeah, we have your improvement board, we've got a lead members meeting which anyone can attend, so we could possibly update at that point.
Councillor Dean.
Yeah, just to add my thanks to you, Sue and Joel, for the appraisal of where we are. The report is pretty gloomy, but your narrative was far more encouraging, and I thank you for that. And if everything you're saying is true and comes to fruition, then I have some confidence that come October we'll do a lot better. And thank you for answering the question about the adult social worker, because I did wonder why that was in there. But I think that's a real positive to get those two areas working together and sharing those skills, and maybe some of the systems as well. I don't know. But yeah, no, I just wanted to add my thanks, and yes, be brutal and harsh and do all that. Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sue. I know we all welcomed your appointment. It's very good to have you here. And thank you as well for the frank and honest appraisal of the report here. As others have said, obviously, to take a backward step is disappointing. But as Councillor Dean has just said, I think the narrative that we have here today is that actually we are setting the foundations for improvement again. And to pick up on the same point, I think combining adults and children's sort of under one directorate makes sense, given, you know, the small numbers both of service users and of staff. You know, we often refer to being one brick thick in terms of the staffing across the council, where, as you said yourself, you know, sickness or losing staff takes away, or has a big impact, and we lose a lot of skills and knowledge that way. So building resilience and strength in depth with staff supporting each other across the services is crucial, making sure we don't lose that institutional knowledge. I suppose my question is, once we have carried out this root and branch examination of where we are, and we put the work in, we improve standards and practice, how do we ensure that we sustain that? How do we make that sustainable? So it's not just about fixing where we are now. How do we keep that going into the future?
I think that's a really pertinent question, because, you know, services that go up and down do not serve the community well. And, you know, the community then doesn't know where they are in terms of trust and respect for the service, and I know that needs to grow. And I think the key to sustainability is permanence of staff as much as you can possibly get. And I think it is about, again, those systems and processes. And as you've alluded to, when people leave, they can take a lot of knowledge with them, which is, you know, sad. I think what you've also got to do, and even the most outstanding authorities, you have to make sure that you've got your performance information, that you've got your quality assurance. And I think what you build then is what I would refer to as a self-writing system. So if you have if your audits for that month of the case files start to indicate that, hang on a minute, what's happening there? It doesn't look as though the visits are on time. So you can go, what's that about then? You know, and start that investigation into why that might be. There might be lots of reasons, but actually, is that poor practice, or is that because, I don't know, the family's been on holiday, something along those lines. So what we need to do is get to a self-writing system. We're not there. I also think there's probably some work to do with our mosaic system, our case recording was wider than that system. It needs some development. That will have cost money, I think. But I think that there is some work there that would actually be helpful. The other thing I think, although perhaps you might think it's tangential, but we need to have a shop window on the world, as it were. And I think, and I know I've said it to Joel, and I think to Councillor Mumford, that our website is not up to date. So families don't really know what is needed from our website. And I just think having that shop door, that transparency at the front door, helps with that, because then people know what they're holding us to account over. So without you know, some of the website for children's services refers to 2015. That does not give you confidence that we know what we're doing with Working Together 26. So I would really, you know, and I appreciate the resource implication, but, you know, that's about, you know, holding us to account as well and showing that transparency that I've alluded to.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I think there's one other thing which is relevant to what you were saying, Sue, that members can support with. We've got the draft Children and Young People's Plan out on the website now. We're doing consultation on that. We have done consultation with children and young people on it previously. But everything we've spoken about today, plus other themes we've spoken about in various different committees in the last few months and years, and what we're going to speak about in the next agenda item, are relevant to the next Children and Young People's Plan. So anything that members can do to either contribute themselves or encourage their electorate to take part in that Children and Young People's Plan consultation would be good. And then we also wanted the Children and Young People's Plan to sort of run concurrently with the new corporate plan. So again, just making sure that as the corporate plan goes on the right-hand side, the Children and Young People's Plan on the left is sort of matching that. So, and that's very much live. The deadline, I think, is the 2nd of June for some feedback on that. But there's a piece of work just to raise the profile of that consultation.
Any more questions? Well, I'll just take the recommendation.
Well, which one are we on?
Oh, sorry, Councillor.
What are we on?
We're on the update of the Ofsted report.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make a general point that I found it frankly quite alarming because the combination of adult social services, adult services and children's services have virtually brought the council to its knees in a budgetary sense, and we hadn't got that emergency loan that was sort of arranged, then we wouldn't be able to balance the budget. And I just find it quite alarming that we got this Ofsted report after a considerable amount of resource had gone into it, and I was very disappointed. And hopefully you'll be able to turn it around soon. I know it's you weren't actually overseeing it. I just thought it was worth making that point, though. I'm sure somebody else has already, though. Thank you.
Right. Recommendation. Members are requested to note the content set out in this report and in Appendix A. Could I have a proposer? Councillor Marcus, seconder. Councillor White, all those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you very much, Sue. Of course, you're next one as well, aren't you? Right. Now we go to agenda item 7. An update on post-16 education. Yes, would you like to present that? Thank you.
I'm just wondering, Chair, how you would like me to present this. I know that there are also further questions based on the questions that are in the report. So I can speak to the original responses that were made, or whether you want to cover that through the additional questions that have come in.
I think we'll cover it with the additional question, shall we? Or is that all right with you?
I've got some potential additional questions to the additional questions. So there might be some feedback questions. So if I could ask them individually, if that's okay.
Do you want to start with that, or?
Yeah. Do you want to present first, or?
I can certainly address the questions that came in yesterday. Is that what you'd like me to do?
Shall I start with the?
Yes, please.
Shall I?
Yeah, it's sorry, colleagues, it's a bit complex in questions and questions.
We're a bit late getting the questions to you.
We were, yes. Okay, so I'll just start with saying thank you for the post-16 update. Firstly, I wanted to address a specific issue regarding the residue government grant referred to at page 115, paragraph 1.8. The update does not acknowledge the residue has been shared previously to parents. Can I ask why this inconsistency was not highlighted to members?
You'll acknowledge that some of these answers I don't have. However, what I can pledge to do is to come back with that. I don't know. I know that any underspend now has to go back to the Department of Education.
Okay, Thank you. I had hoped that Laura would be here because I think she's got a little bit more knowledge, as in background knowledge.
Laura's
because-
unwell at the moment.
That's not. Okay.
Just a moment. Leo, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just conscious of members of the public who might be watching the meeting. I just think, obviously, decision for you, Chair, whether it would be beneficial just for Sue to give an overview of the report, taking it as read, but just provide an overview. And then if there are any additional questions, if members can ask those in the usual way, but to just go straight into questions, I think will be slightly confusing for members of the public.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll go through the report then. Thank you.
That'll be fine.
Okay, so this report has been prepared to provide responses to the information requested by the Scrutiny Committee. It also gives you an overview of the meeting that was held with Minister Jackie Smith, with MP Andrew George in the Department of Education. So the first question was a clear statement of the statutory position for the Isles of Scilly. Isles of Scilly children, mainland accommodation is the only practical route to accessing post-16 education and the implications this has for the council duties. So the local authority must ensure that there's sufficient suitable education and training is available to meet the reasonable needs of persons in their area who are over compulsory school age but under 19. And in exercising this duty, the local authority must have regards to the locations and times at which the education or training is provided. So the location reference there is particularly pertinent to the Isles of Scilly. And these provisions establish a statutory duty. So there is an absolute statutory duty to secure sufficiency of provision and then take reasonable steps to facilitate access. But it's not a duty on an individual local authority to provide or deliver post-16 education directly. And this statutory provision does empower a council to provide board and lodgings as it thinks fit, on the prior condition that they're satisfied that they're suitable, on the prior condition that the council is satisfied that suitable education can't be provided elsewhere, other than unless the council provides this board and lodgings, which I know is the crucial crux of this matter. And with that, the council needs to have a transport policy statement, putting out the arrangements for the provision of transport. And I am aware that there's considerable concern about that, and I understand that the policy is still in draft form. The statutory provisions don't equate to a general duty to provide and fully fund transport and accommodation. The council does receive a grant from the government, which is a contribution towards boarding, accommodation and travel costs, and that at the moment is calculated on £8,000 per eligible learner, and the council has the freedom to use the total sum flexibly. And the council also provides additional funding of £1,635 per eligible learner. In fact, an eligible learner is all of our learners between the ages of 16 and 18. There's no means testing with regards to that. The council does not apply a means-related test, and the full funding there is provided to each eligible learner. The Children and Families Act, just as a sort of a side point, is that we have to secure the specified special education provision for young people, and that is a direct and absolute duty, but it applies to children who have an education, health and care plan, and not to general post-16 provision. In response to the question, an explicit assessment of the safeguarding responsibilities arising from placing children away from home, including where the current practice does not meet statutory expectations. So the local authorities' safeguarding duties are set out in the Children Act, which is an act that's been revised over the years, and it's the general duty of a local authority to safeguard and promote the welfare of children within their area and need. It is also, which is actually written there, it is a partnership responsibility. It is not just the responsibility of the local authority. and all relevant agencies must have regard to safeguarding duties. And those duties are nationwide, as it were. And it does, as I said, it's not just organisations in the next paragraph down, it is about individuals as well, and any services that contract out to others. And there's no, and I think this is where some of the challenges arise. There isn't a statutory requirement, there isn't a statutory framework to assess the arrangements that we've got. There are some formats, some regulatory formats that knock into, as it were, some of the arrangements that we've got. So the arrangements that we've got are a young person 16 to 18, where arrangements are made by parents and where a child is not a looked after child or a care leaver, or subject to private fostering. So that's really quite, I think, pertinent in this way. What framework would we use and could we use to assess these? Statutory framework could or should we use to assess provision? I've just put a quick explanation of private fostering there. It is where parents make arrangements to place a child, but it's 0 to 16, unless the child has a disability. So that, again, doesn't fit where we are. It's about sufficiency of learning opportunities. There is something around, there is in the report an update in terms of the meeting that Sue Ross, the previous interim director, had with the minister, and she was very much about securing sufficiency and equity of provision. There is, in terms of the grant, this the condition that families make their own arrangements for transport and accommodation, and that's made clear in the policy. However, I acknowledge again the challenges of that. And it is about making safe decision making, recognising the practical necessity of mainland residents. Where a young person may meet the threshold of becoming a child in need, the local authority must consider whether services, including accommodation-related support, are required. And this would come through what would be a social work assessment of the needs, and it is about need. I think we have to take everything back down to the needs of the child. Ofsted did make a comment in the monitoring visit in October that those children who have to live away from home on the mainland to access their preferred post-16 accommodation, including those with additional needs, often live in homes where the council has limited assurance of their safety and well-being. I think one thing that I've been quite impressed with is the work of the transitions worker who is on the mainland and who does a considerable amount of work with children and young people. She does visit, I understand that she visits host families. She also is in the colleges and has good relationship with the colleges, and also has group meetings for some of the young people. I acknowledge again that not every child is on the mainland is in Cornwall, but I understand that she does also have contact with those that are outside of that particular area. The Ofsted monitoring visit, as you'll see from the report, doesn't make reference to post-16 accommodation. There is particular interest from Steve Lowe, who was our lead inspector this time, and he didn't mention it, although he spoke about it as a safeguarding issue this time, and has gone back to his, or pledged that he was go back to his regulatory policy unit to come up with some ideas about how it might work. But we haven't heard anything back, which is a bit of a shame, really, and we haven't heard anything back. The comment that I previously made about the monitoring visit in the previous monitoring visit does indicate a potential practice gap, but that's not defined in statutory duty. I would say that statutory duty doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing something about it, but in terms of the statutory responsibilities, and indeed following on to the questions, it is really about safeguarding is always open to interpretation in terms of the needs of the child, the the support that they get. So I think that it's, when you're answering questions about a statutory duty, it is not as clear as a dividing line between those who are statutorily in need of support and in-date safeguarding and those who aren't. But we do have general safeguarding issues. And there isn't a statutory requirement to assess or approve accommodation, as I've said before. Accordingly, any absence of universal accommodation assessment process we feel doesn't constitute a breach of statutory duty, but of policy consideration. And the grant, the condition of the grant from the DFE is that families and post-16 students make their own arrangements, and that's not done by the council. Moving on, a full explanation of the DFE's, the question is the request, a full explanation of the Department for Education's position regarding assurance models and the resulting accountability that rests with the council. Okay, so the local authority is not able to provide a definitive or authoritative position on behalf of the Department of Education. It would not be appropriate for us to do that, and we would be criticised for doing that. However, based on recent correspondence and discussions with the department, they're not prescribing a national assurance model for post-16 accommodation, and would not be willing to provide a local assurance tool. Moving on, a transparent account of the financial position, including the underspend, its causes, and the equity implications for families who have met costs privately. As I've mentioned before, the Minister has stated she is looking at equity of education for young people on the Isles of Scilly. It is important to note that we have less than 5 young people who are not in education, employment and training, which I think is a good figure, although it is 5, and any unutilised funding does have to be returned to the DFE. And that's been that was debated in the meeting, and that's a very clear view of the Minister. So causes of underspend, a reduction in the attendance of forecasted numbers, families spending under the grant amount, which is most likely to occur when they're living with families on the mainland. Moving on again, an evaluation of whether the current post-16 model is compatible with the Council's statutory duties, and if not, what options exist to establish a lawful, safe and equitable system. There is no statutory duty to provide post-16 education directly or to assess or approve accommodation arrangements, which doesn't mean to say that you don't have to do, well, it doesn't mean to say that we can't or won't do anything, and indeed we have put a transitions worker in place. I've also real plans to give a particular responsibility to a social worker, so if there are concerns that the transition worker feels that she needs advice or to cope with, that there would be a specific social worker who she could relate to. We do have a duty in terms of policy statement, and some of these answers are replicating some comments in other questions because they're relevant to the answer of the question. I won't mention the post-16 transport policy again, but we do need to have one, and the policy will be due for statutory consultation and further consideration in readiness for the 31st of March. So members have the opportunity to consider all that's in the report and all relevant implications by that point. So the next page really is a report from Sue Ross, particularly around the meeting with the Minister. I think I was only able to join online. It was about my second day in. I think the MP advocated as well as he could for the children and young people of the Isles of Scilly, and the Minister was broadly sympathetic and recognised the unique governance position. And I think the uniqueness is part of our challenge, really, because it is almost sort of one-off, which doesn't mean to say it's not important, but it is a challenge. And she does feel very strongly about the need for high-level and high-quality information. She wasn't talking about providing additional costs. Well, she was very clear that it wasn't about providing additional costs to meet boarding school costs. moving on, I think we talked about supported lodgings and additional support on the mainland in addition to the transitions work currently funded. But we said that couldn't be made without possibility. The additional support on the mainland could not be provided without additional DFE financial support, which is why and it's still a plan which I really want to follow through about making, so for example, a social worker just that bit more responsible and having more knowledge of the children on the mainland. So if the transition worker, who's not a qualified social worker as such, can have particular reference to. And the colleges themselves do have a key responsibility to support the welfare of students. As a slight aside, I am a governor of a further education college in Gloucestershire where I live, and I'm impressed with their support services to students. So I very much expect, for example, Truro College to have sufficient and similar arrangements. So there has been, the Minister asked the Council to cost up arrangements with civil servants, and that has been done and was presented to a members' briefing. We agreed that following further consultation, we would draw up proposals for consideration by the DFE. We met with the DFE earlier this week, at the end of last week. And the Minister was also very keen that additional funds could be agreed. There wouldn't be any retrospective reclaim of costs. So I've gone through that in some detail because I think that that's what it bears and that's what it deserves. But those are the responses to the questions that were presented to scrutiny.
Thank you, Sue. Councillor Sims.
Yeah, no, this has been going on for rather a long time now. We had a report previously, but it just seems to me that the legal position remains fuzzy at best. Exactly what's going on, particularly we asked the DFE for a full explanation for the position regarding blah blah blah, and again they're not really giving us one. I just sort of get the feeling that the DFE is prevaricating on this so that they don't incur a wider liability somewhere else by doing something for us, and it's just, I mean, and it's the legal position as fuzzy as it seems to me, because it seems very difficult to get anything definitive in my mind about this.
I mean, if I can just come in and just say, obviously, this has been an issue for the islands for as long as I've been monitoring officer in October 24. We've addressed on many occasions and in many meetings, including for council back in March last year, in scrutiny just February of this year, that the legalities around the provision of post-16 transportation and accommodation. And I think we set out clearly before that it is accepted that most pupils must, in most cases for the Isles of Scilly, travel to the mainland for education. There are some exceptions to that. But the legislative position is clear in that does not therefore equate to a statutory duty on the council to provide or fully fund accommodation and transportation in that respect. What we do have is an obligation to set out our post-16 transport policy statement, which sets out what we as a council believe is necessary to facilitate access to education. Obviously, the post-16 transportation policy was approved by full council in March last year. In terms of the issue around host families and Ofsted putting in their letter the issue of there being a greater level of assurance for the council in respect of children who reside with host families or in other accommodation on the mainland, the difficulty is there is no regulatory framework. There is and I think that's where Ofsted have probably, come to the same lack of clarity when they've gone off to seek to provide any sort of guidance to the council in that respect. I mean, I know Sue and Laura have had additional conversations with Ofsted that I've not been party to, and that the individual had done some work elsewhere where there was some element of good practice which he would share with us. And it would be that, it would be other examples of good practice, but there is no regulatory framework to provide an assurance for accommodation of that nature. So I think that's where there is that grey area. But in terms of the council's statutory duties, I think we've been quite clear in the reports we've taken to full council about how we say our post-16 transport policy statement meets the statutory duty. It's a decision for sort of officers within the service and members when we bring papers before you as to how you want that service provision to develop. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's just, it's principally the absence of the statutory framework, which I don't think that the government's likely to put in because it's possibly a can of worms for them. Thank you.
Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Your update confirms, and I quote, that the Council has the freedom to use the total sum flexibly for those purposes. Those purposes are confirmed as accommodation, boarding and travel. In 2024, the Council retained the underspend and divided it between families from those two post-16 year groups towards those purposes. The almost 66,000 residue currently under discussion refers to the 25-26 cohorts for which there continued to be inadequate number of host families, no transition worker on the mainland, or a legally compliant transport policy when post-16 accommodation decisions had to be made. Many of these families had no choice but to seek the safest option for their child, which for many was boarding. There are parents of these 2 school years who are still in debt with loans, have unpaid council tax and outstanding utility bills. Some of them now face having to make post-16 plans again for younger siblings. Why has the council still not utilised this fund to reimburse out-of-pocket families against their submitted receipts and in accordance with the Department for Education contract?
I can't answer that question here today. I can take the question away. I can cite the Minister in terms of no retrospective funding. I think that's the best answer I can give at this period, at this time. I think it's, I don't really have anything to say specifically on that, but retrospective funding, the Minister is absolutely against at the moment. But in terms of previous discussions and previous decisions, I can't answer that question today.
Okay, thank you. There is no reason to return the money and every reason to distribute it in accordance with the legally signed contract with the Department for Education. The meeting with the Minister was to secure increased funding for post-16. Can you imagine the reaction locally if it turns out officers actually lost families £66,000? It seems clear that there is no legitimate reason not to stay aligned with the contract. So I would like to recommend that this particular point be referred to full council to determine why officers will not adhere to the contract with the Department for Education. Do you want to hang on to that one for, and I'll
just a moment. I think Leah would like to. Leah, would you like to come in on that one?
Yeah, I'm just wanting to clarify if Councillor Blackwell is referring to the residual funds for the 24-25 cohort.
The money that was left over from 25, yeah, last year. 24.
So the point you're raising is to seek for the redistribution of funds to parents who had children in the 24-25 cohort.
My recommendation is that this particular point be referred to full council to determine why officers will not adhere to the contract with the Department for Education. That's my recommendation.
So just for sort of members, for other members, for members at the meeting, just in terms of some background, which I think is important to provide, is that in November 2024, the matter went to full council, where it was approved by the Department for Education for that year for the residual funds to be shared out with family members, and that was done in accordance with a full council decision in November 2024. I think as Sue and Laura set out in the February Scrutiny Committee and to some extent in the December full council meeting last year, I think it was explained that in conversations with DFE, at that point they hadn't ruled out using the residual funds totally, but that they were not supportive of just a redistribution of funds. And I think Laura gave some explanation as to the reasons for that in terms of equity across families in the cohort. I think conversations have progressed even further since then in terms of use of the residual funds at all. So just giving that information to members just for full context.
Thank you. We mustn't forget the Department for Education's desire for equality of opportunity, and that would certainly, if this goes to full council for discussion, then I think that would be quite an important point to remember and to remind everyone of. Okay, so that's that recommendation. I would just like to...
Should we take that recommendation first, because that needs to be proposed and seconded? Is that right, Leah?
Chair.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Grottick.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask the monitoring officer where we actually stand in the way of revisiting decisions that we previously made. Now, it's very difficult to remember, but from my understanding in September 24, we actually looked at, I am hugely sympathetic to post-16 parents, let me set that on the record. Nevertheless, looking at the budget, we did actually come to some firm decisions, and it concerns me somewhat that we seem to be revisiting those decisions, which in the annual council of 2017, and since I've been away, I only had a chance to have a quick look, we actually agreed that certain decisions could not be revisited, and I agree, it's technically out of the time frame. But it seems to me that we made a firm decision with the information that we have. We revisited it in September 24, and now we seem to be going back, which does concern me in terms of procedures and protocols and general way in which the council runs. Obviously, continuing discussions with the Department of Education are nothing but good.
Councillor Marcus?
Yeah, so my question is, when we received funding from the DFE, or we signed a contract with them, is that correct? At that time for that year's funding? Leah, did you know?
I'm not aware of the individual arrangements for each child or each young person or each family with a young person, how they receive.
I'm not talking about it's with the DFE and between the DFE and the council.
Right.
I'm talking about. So my question was...
Leah, would you like to come in on that?
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, so every year the Department for Education allocates a level of funding to the council, and with that becomes a grant funding arrangement. So it is a grant funding agreement that the council gets. I think the conversation, I mean, I've not been a party to these conversations, so this is from my understanding, is that the clause which Councillor Blackwell is quoting from, there is also a separate section within the grant funding agreement where it allocates an amount per student, which is the 8,000, and then obviously we provide a top up in addition to that of the £1,635, and it's those two being read together in terms of the DFE being resistant to any residuals then just being divided between families. But can I just come back on Councillor Grottick's point? I do think Councillor Grottick makes a very valid point, because at December full council last year, the issue of the residual funds and the spending of the residual funds was actually decided by members, and members decided to uplift the amount for college visits from 250 to 500, to uplift the boating from off islands also, and then to use the rest of the residual funds for the 24-25 cohort for use for a hardship fund. So that decision has actually already been made. The negotiations with DfE since then have been around being able to utilise those residual funds for a hardship fund in accordance with our post-transport policy statement. And it is those negotiations that are ongoing. So if members were minded to support the recommendation by Councillor Blackwell, and it would be members already took a decision on the use of the residual funds for the 24-25 cohort back in December. So Councillor Groswick has a valid point.
Can I just interrupt there? I'm not asking for any decisions to be revisited. I'm asking for the council to decide whether it should go against an agreement that it has with the Department for Education. So it's quite specific.
But it hasn't gone against an agreement by the decision it made at its full December meeting last year. So in December last year, members made the decision to utilise the residual funds for those three elements I've just outlined.
So, sorry, to go back to my question, we've got, there's a funding agreement. Within that funding agreement, is there clawback? Is there a clause which claws back any unspent residual funds?
I don't think there is, but I'd have to see the most recent.
So there's no clawback. So therefore the money, grant funding money is ours, regardless of conversations that are having at the moment or anything. Nothing's written down, am I correct, about there's no changes in actual the contract or anything like that?
See, but can I just jump in? What I don't understand, right, is like 5 years ago, we were splitting the money individually for each student, and if that student didn't claim all that money, we were sending it back to the Department for Education. Now, we changed that because of the parent pressure group, and then the council asked the DfE if we could keep the money. The DfE said yes, and you can do with it what you want. Now, in this report, paragraph...
For that year, they agreed
yes, absolutely, for that year. And in paragraph 1.8 on this report, it says the council has the freedom to use the total sum flexibly for those purposes, so travel and accommodation, but that it currently allocates this sum on a same per learner basis. So it sounds like we already know the answer. We can spend this money in that year group if we want to. Now, we decided back in December to start this hardship fund, which now we can't do. The Department for Education said we can't do that. So we're back to where we were before, the year before, when we did split the residue funding between those eligible post-16 parents. So I don't understand why we can't just go back to that. Now, am I oversimplifying this, or am I getting it wrong, or is something else going on here? Silence. Anyway.
I think that the meeting is getting waylaid because the decision for the use of the residual funds for 24-25 have already been decided upon by full council in December last year, where you decided to uplift the college placements, visitation monies, to uplift the inter-island boating and to put the rest of the money towards the hardship fund.
But we can't have the hardship fund now.
But Sue, I don't know if you can come in terms of, my understanding is that negotiations with DfE are still ongoing, or have you got a firm direction?
The negotiations with DfE are certainly still ongoing, and I think the DfE are concerned about the position of the Isles of Scilly, but it's coming into that uniqueness again, which means that they don't have anything at the moment really firm to give us. So I think it's almost chicken and egg, as it were, and I think the fact that there's no framework doesn't help with the funding.
Can I say something, please? Councillor Dean just basically summed it up in a nutshell there. The money is available. The contract says we can use it as we will. I don't know why we're not just doing that. It's very, very straightforward. It's helping. We're here to help parents and families. That money would go such a long way for that. I think that we really need to understand that there's no decision being undone here, Councillor Grottick said, and the council should decide whether we go against the agreement. The agreement's already in place, and what I'm asking for in my recommendation is that council itself decide whether we go against something that we're already agreed to and in place to do.
But surely we can't go against what they're saying, because it's their money that they're giving to us.
It's our money. We have the money. It's our money, and we're supposed to. It's got a purpose.
Are you still on about the 24-25? Because that's already been done.
The residue funding that we've got outstanding, nothing's been done with it because we can't have the hardship funds now. So the minister has said that
Councillor Grottick,
potentially might want it back.
Thank you. Can I make a recommendation that we note the request to look at this issue again made by Councillor Blackwell, but that we refer this matter to the Chief Executive as our Chief Financial Officer, because I think there are budgetary implications which are quite complicated, which it's not really appropriate to bring forward now, because I think they're detailed, and I personally haven't got that amount of information in my head, and with great respect to colleagues, I don't think anyone else has either.
Sorry, can I just please finish, come back on that? There is no budgetary implications here. This money is already in place in the bank. It's there to be spent. We have the agreement to say it can be spent. My question is, we need to understand why we're not spending it, and that's why my recommendation's there.
Well, we can certainly ask, sorry Chair, we can certainly ask, but surely we really need our Chief Financial Officer around the table when we discuss this in depth.
Just a moment, Councillor Nixon, would you like to come in as the lead member for finance?
I'm coming, but not as the lead member of finance, just a brief declaration of interest a little bit later in the meeting, as the conversation has strayed into the funds for a particular cohort, which one of my children belongs to. I cannot take part in this part of the debate.
Okay, right.
Sorry, can I come in again?
Just a moment, can I just think a minute?
Can I just interrupt as well?
I just want to try and figure out what the best thing is to do. I think we need a bit more consultation on this before any recommendation is made. Leah, could I ask your opinion on it, please?
Yeah, so I do think that it's veered off into a specific particular direction, referring to the use of the residual funds for 24-25, of which full council have already made a decision of what it will do with it. It's already done two of those things, which is to increase the visitation amounts for college visits and for off-island boating. The only element that is still subject, I understand, unless Sue comes in and corrects me, that is still in negotiations with DFE is the use of the remainder of the residual funding for a hardship fund. Yeah. So until those negotiations are finalised and the council is in a position where they are being instructed by the DFE to return to them the residual funding, I think the issue is somewhat premature. I think members maybe would be able to take assurance that the chief executive and the director for children's services, Sue, liaise with members if we do get to that position, so that members can consider if they do want something brought back before them, before a meeting, before that decision is formally made.
Councillor White.
Yes, sorry, just to weigh in, I think when we made that decision regarding the residual funds, it was with the understanding from officers at the time that the DFE weren't happy to redistribute to families in that particular cohort of any given year. and that they were more favourable towards the hardship fund. So that was the circumstances under which we understood and we discussed, debated and voted. So I think we have to wait and see how the negotiations continue. But if we get to a point where they then say, oh, actually, you can't have it for the hardship fund either, then we have to reopen the discussion and bring this back, because then the background on which we made our decision has shifted. So that's sort of my position on it.
Right. Sue, would you like to come in on this?
I'm just going to say that the Minister is saying that, isn't she, that any underspend, the DFE will not agree to any use of residual funds, and any underspend must be returned. And that's in the report from the Minister. So whether that goes back to 24, 25, but the position of the Minister on the 4th of March this year was that will not agree to the use of any residual funds, and any underspend must be returned.
So we need to really find out whether
but it
that
wouldn't,
is...
sorry to interrupt again, Chair, but it wouldn't be an underspend. That's the point. So if we redistributed that residual funding to those eligible parents that have got receipts to prove that they've spent the money, it's not being reallocated. It's being allocated to where it was supposed to be allocated to. It's we that put the limit on the money. That's what it says in 1.8, that we decide to give each student up to £8,000. We can decide to give each student as much as we like out of that fund and not give some to others. You know, we could.
I'm not sure about that.
But it would. My point is, the money would be spent.
I'm not either, and I don't think there is that information before members today. So we have not been asked today to bring before scrutiny an analysis of the grant funding agreement and how the different terms interact with each other. And some of the issues you're talking about do have implications. So, for example, for the 23-24 cohort, it was split equally between every family, not just every family who had additional invoices that had not been covered. It was just split between every family within that cohort. So I think one of the things that Laura raised in her in the previous scrutiny committee was that if that was done again, it means that some families are more financially compensated than others in terms of the grant if that approach is taken. So I don't think officers have been asked or prepared today to come before members to look at the residual funding and the use of it for the 24-25 cohort, and a detailed analysis of the DFE grant conditions, because they weren't the questions that were posed by scrutiny at the last meeting, and that officers were asked to come back with in terms of its report.
Yes, I think that this discussion's going on long enough now. I think that we should ask Sue to look into this a little bit more, and with more conversations with the DFE, and see how that goes, and to come back. Perhaps you could email the scrutiny members on how you get on.
Are you wanting me to look more at the residual funding? Is that what the question is?
Yes, to know what we can do with this money that's left over, which we've already discussed should go to a hardship fund, but I believe there's a problem with the hardship fund now.
Can I have a specific question maybe formulated to me, so I know exactly what, I mean, I've got a general understanding, but it would be really helpful if scrutiny could pose a question to me. Lee, I don't know whether you think that would be a good way forward, so I've got a framework for my answer.
I mean, in terms of a recommendation, it would be that Sue to obtain confirmation from the DFE on whether or not the residual funding for the 24-25 cohort is being requested by the DFE to be returned. And if it is, to revert to members for further consideration of this point.
Thank you.
And that could be to the next to the next appropriate meeting, which may well be full council. I just think then it gives officers an ability to present to members a copy of the relevant grant funding agreement to which you need to refer yourselves to in order to properly consider the issue.
Yes. Councillor Marcus?
Yeah, I also want to add a recommendation or change the recommendation to say how disappointed I am in the DfE standpoint at the moment. There's obviously a practice gap at the moment that no one seems to be addressing. So it kind of, I think we need to put pressure on the DfE and central government in order to clear up some of this
Yes.
ambiguity, and which is causing frustration for both officers and for members and for the actual end users as well. It's our duty as members to try and get some clarity and some proper service for the end users. So I have sympathy with the officers in that all they have to do is they can only work with legislation and policy. They can't go against it. Us as members, we can do what we want. We can say what we want. So I'm going to say that I'm really disappointed with the DfE. I want officers to put pressure on them to come up with some kind of solution, because if it was their children in the situation that our children are in, they wouldn't be standing for it.
Just to say that we are putting as much pressure on the DfE as we possibly can, and we're meeting with them regularly, but I totally accept your point.
So, what,
Sorry, I'm just going to say I'm not going to vote because I'm actually not a member of the scrutiny.
yes, you are a member of the Scrutiny Committee.
Am I?
Yes, you are.
Oh, right.
Yep,
Thank you
you
then.
can vote.
That's fine, then I will.
Okay,
My understanding was that
that's okay.
And can I also just make clear to members as well that if DfE get to a point where they're not requesting for the residual funding for 24-25 to be returned, then the decision of the December full council continues to stand.
Councillor Blackwell. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
I've been on for about 10 minutes. You just don't seem to
Okay,
see
you've
me.
got to go, haven't you? Yeah.
All I was going to say is that I think we should bear in mind that any decisions, any resolutions we pass here, they're completely advisory. They're not policy. So I just think that perhaps given what we said and Sue's here, she could just take it away and work with it as opposed to make a resolution. And I entirely agree with Dan's last comment about the indisability. Basically, you said much more forcefully what I said earlier on. So I would, if you would like to propose that, I'm very happy to second that recommendation that we are disappointed.
Would you like to read the recommendation out again?
I don't think I can make that speech again, to be honest. For officers to pass on members' disappointment about the lack of clarity and ambiguity around the situation faced by post-16 provision on the Isles of Scilly, something along those lines.
I think Leah's just writing that down.
Could I just question, there's a bigger picture. The DfE are as disappointed in us as we're disappointed in them, I think. Do we need a formal recommendation that sort of puts that on the record? We're sitting down with the DfE on tomorrow. And there are going to be some pretty tough conversations about whether, in all honesty, whether they think we are fit for purpose to carry on as a Children's Services Authority. I think poking the bear at this particular time is possibly not the best strategy to adapt. I think we can communicate it through negotiations and dialogue and discussions, but I think we're at a bit of a precipice. I think they are looking at whether we as a council can provide effective services to children and what the alternatives are. I just wonder whether we can express that as we have done in an open forum, but whether we turn that into a recommendation and start battering the DfE at a time when I think we need to. I just think we are at a precarious position, and making things worse probably might not, well, I don't know. It's up to Scrutiny Committee. I just think tomorrow is not going to be a comfortable meeting, and anything that goes against us at this particular point in time is not favourable.
When did you say? Did you say you're meeting with the DfE tomorrow?
Yeah, the DFE is we're meeting with the DFE tomorrow, Chair.
Well, personally, I think it would be better to let's have, you're having a meeting tomorrow. If you can find out a little bit more about, it seems strange that the residual funding, they said we could keep it, and now they're saying that we can't keep it.
It's
Yeah.
going to be different branches of the DFE,
Yeah.
though. We're not going to be talking with
So you're in a
the
different
managers of this
branch.
particular grant.
Tomorrow's a very serious meeting, which is considering, particularly given the last monitoring visit, whether the Isles of Scilly can keep their children's services. The alternative to us not is to put in a commissioner to look at viability. So I think Councillor Williams' comment is that we are not in good favour of the Department of Education for that particular reason, and whether we should be expressing disappointment with the DFE at this point, although we are disappointed, is a good tactical move.
Can I just say, may I speak?
Yes, of course, sorry.
Thank you. Annex E of the agreement with the Department for Education, point 3, the provider has the flexibility to use the total funding as deemed most appropriate to the need to support the needs of learners. So there's no question about whether we need to give it back. It's ours to do with what we want. But we've just muddied the waters through this meeting. It was very simple. So I'm sorry, but it's it's just very simple. It's got very complicated, and I don't understand why. It was just a case of why would we not do what we're meant to do with it? That was my recommendation.
If I could add it, I think it'd actually be really helpful to have a thorough analysis of the grant funding agreement in terms of the wording, what we can and can't do. And actually, are the DFE within their rights to say that we have to return the residual funds? If we have people that are out of pocket, can we not? You know, that it'd be helpful to have like a thorough analysis of that at some point, just so we know where we stand.
I mean, this that was said with the meeting with the minister might not be referring to that. It might be in the future. So that's not very clear.
Can I just come in again, Chair, just for members? In terms of the grant funding agreement, the section that Councillor Blackwell keeps quoting from, it's that together with other conditions of the grant. So the other condition of the grant that also impacts these negotiations is that an amount is allocated per learner also, and that amount allocated is £8,000 per student. So we could use the total amount flexibly as a council, but we choose to allocate it per student as per the grant conditions. So the terms and conditions do need to be considered together, not just that one condition that Councillor Blackwell keeps quoting.
I know, Leah, can I just interrupt and say, you've said it there, we choose. So we could choose to do something different with it. We can choose to use it as we see fit.
But we haven't. So in accordance with our post-16 transport policy statement, we allocate per learner, we allocate per student, per eligible family, an amount of £9,635. So that is the issue.
So what a sad day that parents are having to spend tens of thousands of pounds and money is being sent back to the Department for Education when the money could be used wisely as it should be according to the contract.
I take Councillor Blackwell's point. I think in terms of taking this forward, I go back to what I've suggested in terms of Sue going away. They've got a meeting with DFE, as they say, where the conversation about the conditions of the grant and the use of the 24-25 residual fund continue, and that we revert to members before any payment is made back to the DFE in that respect. But in terms of the 24-25 residual fund, I do go back to, if we weren't now saying to members there may be an issue for us having to use the residual funds at all, it would be being used as per the decision of December 25 by full council, which is the college visits, the inter-island boating, and the hardship fund. So it still wouldn't be being used to be separated equally between the families from the 24-25 cohort as per that full council decision.
They have submitted receipts, so it doesn't have to be equal, and there hasn't been another parents' consultation as there was before. So there are two things to consider.
That was discussed fully at the December full council meeting, and members decided upon the hardship fund.
Which now isn't allowed. I don't want to have circular conversations. We probably should move on. I agree with Avril. Can I carry on with my summary of what I was speaking about?
Yes, but we did have, Councillor Marcus did have a recommendation that was, or are you going to withdraw
On the
that?
advisement of the lead member for children and Director of Children's Services, I will withdraw that recommendation.
And I'll withdraw seconding it.
Right, yes, thank you.
Can I just make a point?
So we'll ask, sorry, I was going to ask, as we have done before, to ask the Director of Children's and Adults to look into this and come back to us. Thank you. Right, next question.
Okay, to summarise the update, this post-16 update answers some of the questions in form but not in substance. It clarifies legal limits and Department for Education constraints, but avoids acknowledging the practical reality of boarding, recognising any safeguarding risks, addressing financial inequity, or providing the options scrutiny needs to make decisions. As a result, the April report does not fully address the issues that led scrutiny to defer the original paper. In February, the committee raised 5 core problems. A, boarding is the only practical route, but officers have still not stated plainly that the Isles of Scilly students must live on the mainland to access post-16 education. Without this, the statutory analysis is incomplete. B, safeguarding concerns. Ofsted has warned that young people often live in homes where the council has limited assurance of their safety. Scrutiny wanted a clear assessment of where practice fell short, but we have no explanation of where current practice fails to meet expectations. C, Department for Education position and accountability. The department refused to endorse an assurance model. Scrutiny wanted clarity on what this meant for the council's liability. D, financial fairness and the underspend. Families had privately paid thousands above the grant. Scrutiny questioned whether the residual 66,000 could be used to reimburse families. There was no assessment of fairness, no equality impact assessment, and no options for reimbursement. Parents have not been consulted since their last meeting with officers. It does not address equality issues for families who paid privately. And E, whether the current model is lawful, safe and equitable. Scrutiny wanted an honest assessment and set of options for a compliance system. The February report was deferred because these issues were not addressed. The update simply states compliance with the transport policy statement, not the wider duties. It provides no options, risks or resource implications. It does not fully mention our duties under the Local Authority Social Services Act 1970, the Children's Act 89 and 2004, the Education Act 2002 and 11, or the Equality Act 2010. The report does provide a list of some statutory duties, but still avoids stating the key fact that boarding is required. It provides a summary of safeguarding law, but it reframes Ofsted's concerns as practice gaps, not risks. It states the Department for Education's position, but confirms the department will not approve an assurance model, and provides notes from the March meeting with the Minister, which are useful in context, but not a response to Scrutiny's February requests. And Sue, I can't remember the answers to some of your questions, so I might have to come back on them. So my first question is, can officers confirm explicitly whether in practice boarding or mainland residence is the only viable route for the Isles of Scilly young people to access post-16 education?
The only way at present to access formal post-16 accommodation is through boarding or host families on the mainland. That's not boarding schools specifically, but that is boarding. However, there are other routes, as has been alluded to, in terms of formal education, such as home learning, open university, apprenticeships. We don't have to directly deliver delivered directly post-16 accommodation on the island.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on.
Can I just say that I asked the monitoring officer, did we not agree a time frame for questions such as this detailed question so that officers would have time to research before replying?
No, so Scrutiny agreed a set of questions at the last meeting of which the report is premised around, and then a number of additional questions were sent to officers yesterday relating to the report. So, you know, obviously it's a matter for the chair in terms of time and how many questions are permitted. And officers will just assist it as much as we possibly can. In terms of that question just asked, I do think it is important to note that in the Council's post-16 transport policy statement approved by members, it is recognised that there is currently no on-island option for post-16 educational training, and therefore that most young people live on the mainland in term time to attend school or college, so that is set out in the Council's transport policy statement.
Thank you, Leah.
Yeah, so just a point, scrutiny needs both the statutory and the operational reality in terms of whether it's the only viable route.
Yes, we've done that.
Boarding,
already,
yeah.
haven't we?
Without acknowledging the operational reality, the statutory analysis is incomplete. Follow-up questions. Ofsted stated that young people often live in homes where council has limited assurance of their safety and well-being. Can officers confirm whether this constitutes a safeguarding risk under section 17 or 47?
Thank you for the question. In terms of operational risks, in terms of risks to children and young people, I don't think in itself that is a safeguarding risk. I think safeguarding is individual, and it will very much depend upon the individual whether there is a safeguarding risk. I don't think you can actually say as a whole that there is a safeguarding risk. There may be the potential of a safeguarding risk, but the level of safeguarding will depend upon the individual. So, for example, that could be the maturity of the individual. It could be the actual accommodation that they're in. So we have to have an overall duty of care towards our young people. And I think that the transitions officer there has sufficient scrutiny to be able to say whether she is feeling that there might be a risk. And then she's going to have, as I've said before, access to a social worker in terms of looking at that risk specifically through a child protection lens. However, I'm very clear that children should not be subject to social work scrutiny where there is no real need. Safeguarding responsibilities in terms of individuals or indeed larger groups are very onerous. So if children do not need or assessed as not needing child protection or safeguarding action, it is better that they don't, because what parents won't want, in my view, is social work intervention where it's not necessary.
Thank you. Point to note, Ofsted saying that children often live in homes where the council has limited assurance of their safety really could be said to be a safeguarding risk by definition.
I think what I've said was that we now have a transitions worker who, in my professional opinion, is mitigating against those risks in general terms. And what I'm seeking to do is put a safety net under those general concerns.
Thank you. Next question. Where does current practice fall short of statutory expectations, specifically in relation to oversight, assurance and monitoring of accommodation?
And there is no statutory framework, as has been already discussed in the meeting. So in technical terms, we don't fall short because there isn't a statutory framework. However, I would refer back to the general safeguarding duty that we've spoken about before. The frameworks that we have, which do have regular monitoring, indeed inspection, do not fit, and the Ofsted and the DFE acknowledge that they don't fit. So we are going back to the general duty of safeguarding.
Thank you. Can officers explain why the report frames these issues as improvements rather than acknowledging that they represent gaps in statutory safeguarding compliance?
Well, you could argue that improvements are about narrowing those gaps and improving conditions for children. I think that, I think practice gaps, I suppose it comes back to the monitoring visit as well. There are deficiencies and gaps in our practice, and therefore we seek improvements to get them to a better state.
So just to follow up on that, scrutiny cannot evaluate risk if the report avoids stating where practice is below expectations. Please identify the areas where current practice does not meet the standards implied by Ofsted's findings.
You mean the Ofsted's findings from the monitoring visit recently, or Ofsted's findings in the monitoring visit before?
Both if possible.
Well, I think we've already set out the practice deficiencies that are currently at hand and the improvements that we are trying very hard to make. In terms of practice gaps, in terms of children on the mainland, I don't think there are any practice gaps. There is provision that we've put in to mitigate against any risks, but I'm not aware of, particularly in statutory framework concerns, that there is a gap. If there was a statutory framework, like, for example, private fostering, and the visits were not happening in terms with the private fostering schedule, that would be a practice gap in my view. But it's not the same for where there is no provision.
Thank you. What would a lawful safeguarding framework look like for children placed away from home for educational purposes, and what resources would be required to deliver it?
In terms of a statutory framework, the Council cannot put in its own statutory framework. A statutory framework would be approved by the DFE and inspected by Ofsted. I could, I suppose, sit in a darkened room and come up with a framework, but it would have no legal standing. And it would be probably an amalgamation of some of the frameworks that exist. However, they don't exist. But at the bottom of it all would be the safety of children, and that's what we are here as children's social workers and as adult social workers to do. In terms of resources, I can't speak for Ofsted, I can't speak for the DFE, and I can't speak for other children's services, because any statutory framework would have to be nationwide, and therefore it would be really tricky for me to identify the resources that are needed.
Just want to bring Leah in. She's got her hand up. Leah, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to just provide some clarity. So some of these questions sort of make reference to gaps in statutory state safeguarding, fall short of statutory expectations. And I just think it's really important to provide assurance to members that we've been quite clear in our statutory duties, and we set those out in reports both to full council and in press statements that we've made on the issue. About our post-16 transport policy statement being compliant with the statutory duties. And I also think it's important to provide members with assurance that, of course, you are under more scrutiny as well by DFE and Ofsted in terms of their monitoring visits, etc. And yes, they did make a practice recommendation in terms of greater assurance for those who live on the mainland, but they did not identify a statutory safeguarding failure or a compliance issue. And I just think it's important to give members assurance in terms of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. The Council still has section 17 and 47 duties in regards to safeguarding. What would a proportionate assurance model look like if designed to meet those duties?
Again, in terms of proportionate assurance framework, an assurance framework would be something that would be regulated. I think if we put a policy in place locally, it would have no legal standing as such. It would be around, what would be considered good practice here. But again, that's consistent across all local authorities. So I think it's If you just want to repeat the last bit of the question, sorry.
What would a proportionate assurance model look like if designed to meet those duties?
It would be one that had safeguarding and partnership and individual responsibilities, particularly individual responsibilities of parents at its heart.
Thank you. Point to note there, scrutiny cannot evaluate risk if the report avoids naming where statutory duties are not being met.
Well, in terms of statutory duties, in terms of the children on the mainland, we have a statutory duty in terms of children in need and child protection, but that would involve consistent involvement with a social worker as well. So it is something pretty significant to consider, but there isn't a statutory framework.
Don't want to have a circular conversation, but we have section 17 and 47 duties safeguarding.
They are, but they would require considerable assessment by a social worker, and therefore some indication of risk or indication of need would be needed. We've then got the transitions worker who would be able to identify some of that, and then we would put in a social work assessment, and therefore that would be fulfilling our children in need and section 47 obligations.
Can I also add as well that those safeguarding obligations apply across the board for all our silly children, wherever they reside? And so if we're referring to post-16 students, it would be those who, you know, those post-16 students wherever they reside. So I think the council is quite clear in respect of having those overarching general safeguarding duties.
Okay, but we do have the comment from Ofsted about children living in homes where the council has limited assurance of their safety and well-being.
We do, but we have no comment from Ofsted that we are breaching either section 17 or section 47 in that regard.
No, we're just scrutinising what something should be, what the framework should be.
We do.
I think that is a difficult question, Councillor Blackwell. And I think even Ofsted are struggling with that same issue. So they've made that practice recommendation, but what that looks like, you know, that is that grey area that even the regulators themselves are, I think, struggling with.
The report states the Department for Education will not approve or endorse an assurance model. Can officers confirm that this means accountability for safeguarding and suitability rests entirely with the council?
In my view, well, you're absolutely right, the DFE and Ofsted are not, and it's the grey area that I think Leah's just alluded to, are not recommending a framework. They're not recommending a framework because the frameworks that we have do not exist in terms of covering 16 to 18 education, on, you know, the 16 to 18 educational situation, as it were. So they're not recommending it. So does that mean that safeguarding rests entirely with the council? As I've said before, safeguarding is a general responsibility upon agencies. Safeguarding is never purely a council responsibility, and indeed responsibility also falls to parents.
What legal advice has been taken on the council's liability if a safeguarding incident occurs in accommodation that the council has not assessed?
In terms of, if I think I'm answering this question right, in terms of any child protection investigation, it is often on individual child protection. It would be that of legal advice, particularly in terms of escalating those concerns, would be taken. That's a more specific, more individual answer than I think you're asking for. But if you're asking for, have we taken general advice? It's my understanding that we haven't, but I would need to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. That's a no. Given the Department for Education's position, what is the council's plan for designing a lawful proportionate assurance system that meets our duties?
We can design a system here, specifically the Isles of Scilly, but it will have no legal standing.
Okay, so when will draft models be presented to scrutiny?
I think it would be very challenging for us to put together a model that would have a well, we can't put together on the islands or indeed in the country something that would be statutory. That would have to go through the Department of Education and would need to go through Ofsted. And indeed, there are other regulators in terms of education. I could come to you with what I think might be an okay framework, but I think that would be risky in itself because Ofsted frameworks, because DFE frameworks, any regulatory framework, including through HMIP, the Prisons Inspectorate, would be thoroughly looked at, thoroughly analysed, thoroughly put through legal, and anything I put to you would probably be Sue Butcher's version of what she thinks would be okay, but I would be very unhappy about doing that because I think it would not actually provide the safety that you're seeking.
Okay, thank you. Point to note that the absence of a Department for Education model does not remove responsibility. It places full burden on the council. Thank you. What assessment has been made of the equity implications for families who complied with the law but incurred debt because the grant was insufficient?
I think we've touched on some of that question already, and I'm, in terms of equity, has any formal assessment, have we gone round and asked parents how much they're in debt, so maybe to make the decision about whether that is equitable or not? No, it hasn't. I don't know how intrusive parents would find that, but in terms of your general question, the answer is no.
Why not?
Well, because the decision hasn't been made to do it, and I think that actually we would need some mandate to ask every single parent who has a child between 16 and 18, and I don't understand that we have that mandate.
Okay. I would have thought it would be a good way to go forward on that point, if that can be thought about.
I would want member endorsement of that.
Okay.
Can I just add a point on that point? So again, just bringing it back to members in terms of the post-16 transport policy statement itself was the subject of an equality impact assessment, which went before members in the March meeting last year when the policy itself was approved. So just thought I'd
has that been
let members know.
Has that been updated in view of the draft policy coming to full council at the end of
It won't do, but it will be.
It will be.
It will be as part of the review.
So parents will be asked.
Will be asked.
The equity implications, how much they have to spend.
So I think that's separate from doing an equality impact assessment than going to each individual parent to ask them what has been the financial implications for their child going to post-16 education. I think the duty on the local authority is when they're bringing a policy forward to assess the equality impact across the board. Of course, what they'll do is engage with parents and young people on the cohort coming in accordance with the legislative provisions when they do that.
Thank you. Does the council consider the current post-16 model to be fully compliant with its statutory duties under section 15ZA, section 509AA and safeguarding legislation?
What number question is that, please?
14.
We are fully compliant with section 152A, in my view, and the safeguarding legislation is separate from that, and it's the safeguarding legislation is obviously part of that as well, but I don't think that we are. Just repeat the question for me, please.
Does the council consider the current post-16 model to be fully compliant with its statutory duties under section 15ZA, section 509AA and safeguarding legislation?
I don't have the actual sections in my head, but I do know that there's no statutory framework. I do know that we seek to keep children as safe as possible. In terms of actual compliance with those sections of the law that you've just quoted, I'd need to go back and individually match them.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just come in on that point, Chair?
Certainly.
So just to reiterate to members that obviously when we brought the matter to full council in March last year, we did set out the 4 legal implications in relation to that paper and the post-16 transport policy statement being compliant with the statutory provisions. We also issued various press statements over the last 12 to 18 months where we set out how the council considers its post-16 transport policy statement to be compliant with statutory provisions. I think the issue for the council going forwards is service improvement, isn't it? So we've talked very clearly from the latter end of last year about how we've sought to engage with families to look to further improve the service, and some of those service improvements, like the transition worker, like the DBS checks for host families, etc., again have been fully set out in press statements by the council and in all member briefings. So I just wanted to provide assurance to members in that respect.
Thank you.
Thank you. What timeline is proposed for members to make informed decisions before the statutory deadline of the 31st of May 2026 for the transport policy?
I can't answer that, I'm afraid. At the moment, Laura's not here, so I will take that question away and come back with an answer. My apologies.
Okay, thank you. So in respect to the proposed recommendations, I struggle to be asked to simply note the contents of a report which does not dispute that the Council has limited assurance of the safety of children and confirms this as gaps in practice. I would like to propose that in light of the Department for Education's desire for equality of opportunity, that Scrutiny prepare a report to be submitted to full Council for a review and action of matters mentioned today, focusing on safeguarding and inequity to families on the Isles of Scilly.
Sorry, was that? I didn't realise that was a question.
That's like, no, it wasn't a question. It was just my comment about the recommendation that I struggle to be asked to simply note the contents of a report.
I accept that comment.
Thank you. And just to propose that we do a report to be submitted to full Council on what we've heard today, and matters be discussed focusing on safeguarding inequity to families on the islands.
So you want to make another recommendation?
I do.
Did you catch that one, Leah? Another recommendation? Would you like to?
When you say another recommendation, is there a recommendation on the table at the moment?
No.
No, I didn't think there was.
Oh, you're making a new recommendation? No.
The first one wasn't accepted.
No, I know that.
So this is the only one.
So this recommendation is that officers prepare a report for full Council to address. Can you say it again, Councillor Blackwell?
Certainly. In light of the Department for Education's desire for equality of opportunity, I'd like to propose that Scrutiny prepare a report to be submitted to full Council for a review and action of matters mentioned today, focusing on safeguarding and inequality to families on the islands.
For a review, can you say those last few words? For a review of?
Certainly.
Action.
For a review and action of matters mentioned today, focusing on safeguarding and inequality to families on the Isles of Scilly.
Have we a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor White? All those in favour?
Do you not think we should discuss it a minute first?
Yes, you can discuss
I mean,
it
I just
before you go any further.
I can see where Councillor Blackwell's coming from here, but I don't really see the utility of it, because we have sort of done this before and the council's made its position fairly clear. But I could be persuaded differently, but I've not heard anything today that would persuade me differently, that there would be a great deal of utility in doing this all again, because I don't think the base position has changed, unfortunately.
Any other comments, Councillor Marcus?
I think we're hampered by statutory, by the lack of the DfE's engagement in the issue. Basically, not their lack of engagement, but just that we haven't got anything to hang anything on. We've already said to them the position is untenable. We've already said to them we want to change it. Councillor Williams has said they're deciding tomorrow whether we even have a children's services or not.
Not
So,
deciding tomorrow, but they're talking to us tomorrow about that. I don't think there'll be a decision tomorrow, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
yeah, so it's kind of, does feel a bit moot, Councillor Blackwell, to be honest. So it's kind of...
This isn't necessarily about the Department for Education. This is about what needs, we're scrutinising children's safety. So if we find here in scrutiny that something isn't right or isn't safe, then we need to look at that, and that's what we need to report on. And if something is wrong, then perhaps we need to look at our own budgets. And yes, I know budgets are terrible, but we need to establish whether more money needs to be forthcoming from the council in some way, shape or form, whether we've got it or not. But we need to establish that if there's a safeguarding issue, we need to establish how we can prevent that from happening. This needs to come through us via a report. It's not necessarily anything to do with the Department for Education, but we need to establish if safeguarding risks.
So, Councillor Nixon.
Yeah, so I don't think we've heard anything in this meeting just now to suggest there is any new evidence on safeguarding issues. If we're currently legally compliant, in part because there is no statutory framework, I'm a bit confused as to what a report coming to council could contain anyway, other than reiterating what's just been said.
Yeah, I'd be more in favour of putting pressure on DfE to change their stuff than going over stuff here, to be honest. I mean, I think that's the issue, because we're implementing
We've already
rules.
established that they're going to have conversations with DfE.
More conversation, great.
Well,
But it's kind of,
that's the way it goes.
Can I just add, in terms of scrutiny of children's safety, there isn't another authority in the country that has the scrutiny we're getting from Ofsted. If they were to go into Cambridgeshire, Lancashire, they're taking a snapshot of cases. They might take 5% of the open cases. Here, they're looking at every case. They're looking at every word. They're looking at every comma. There isn't any more that Ofsted could be looking at here. If they go to another authority, they might just take a random 2 from there, 5 from there, 6 from there, and then they're sort of trying to summarise. Here, they've looked at every case for the last 3 years, and they're clear weaknesses. We've had that in the previous report. But Ofsted are the national governing body for scrutinising safeguarding, and they're looking at every piece of documentation. I agree with Councillor Marcus. I think it's the Department for Education angle that is probably more, is going to give us more than just going through safeguarding again. Because there's nothing else to look at in safeguarding. We've looked at it, everything for year on year on year.
Okay, right, we've got a recommendation. We've had a seconder. All those in favour? And against?
Chair, are you able to say the numbers just because I can't see the room?
Yes, two in favour and 1, 2, 3, Tim? Abstain. 3, 4 against. And
No, I'm abstaining as well.
oh, you're abstaining, sorry. 2, 4, 3 against, 2 abstentions.
So that's not carried.
No, it's not carried. Right, we'll take the recommendations that are on here. That members are requested to note the content.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
At risk of getting lynched over.
Sorry,
I have
Steve,
another question,
I keep forgetting you.
I'm sat in the wrong place, and it's not particularly contentious. It's a question I've wondered about for quite a long time. If a 16-year-old child from Taunton comes over here, as he or she perfectly to work, and there's a safeguarding issue, whose jurisdiction is it? Taunton or ours? I would have thought it would be ours. And this is something I've never understood, that these kids go away and the safeguarding, I cannot see how the bulk of the safeguarding is our responsibility. It's surely, because we never mentioned the other local authority involved in this, and I just want clarification on that. I just think that would be useful for members as well.
Sue?
If a child comes here and a safeguarding incident occurs here, we would investigate it. So if there was a child protection, if child protection incident, which is high level, happens in Cornwall, it will be Cornwall that would investigate it, unless the child was a looked after child or well, not a care leaver because that's 18 plus. But nonetheless, I would expect that the Isles of Scilly would be aware of it and would contribute to a strategy discussion.
So there's an element of this. The safeguarding is a shared responsibility between the host and us. And I don't think we've ever really, that point's ever been really made at all. And I think it's quite useful to clarify.
Well, I think what I've tried to say is safeguarding is everybody's responsibility, and there are specific responsibility on agencies and partners to do that.
Yeah, I just wanted it specific, really.
Councillor Dean.
Just going to say that recommendation 2 is asking us to agree on the frequency for future committee updates on post-16 education. So maybe that can go some way to giving Councillor Blackwell what she wants.
Yes, it's already on the list for June. There'll be an update in, where's the work plan gone? Oh, I think there's an update in June, isn't there? Yes. Okay. Right, we'll take the...
every scrutiny meeting.
Yes, it is at the moment, yeah. It comes in with the Ofsted report now.
Well, I think we have to, according to the recommendations, we have to agree that.
Yes,
so,
right, okay. Members are requested to note the contents of this report. Members are requested to agree on the frequency for future committee updates on post-16.
I'll propose that it comes to every scrutiny.
Every scrutiny, right. Yeah.
I'll second that.
Second that. Everybody in favour?
We're doing just set number 2, are we?
Yes. It comes to every scrutiny.
We're just doing recommendation 2.
No, we're not doing it. We're voting on what we're going to do.
We're not doing 1 yet.
Yes, we've done that.
Are we voting on 1? Recommendation 1.
Right, let's do recommendation 1 first then, please.
Thank you.
A proposer and a seconder, please. Recommendation 1. All those in favour? Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, just for my benefit, I do apologise, just because I can't see. Are you able to say who proposes and seconds?
Was proposed by Councillor Nixon and seconded by Councillor White. And
Thank you.
yes. Right, recommend...
I'm abstaining from that.
Oh, sorry, 1 abstention.
Thank you.
So we've agreed, haven't we? You proposed that we'll have it come every... Right. Councillor Dean proposed that post-16 comes to every scrutiny meeting, seconded by Councillor Blackwell. All those in favour? Yes, that was everybody.
Thank you.
I'll abstain because...
One abstention from Councillor Grottick.
Because I do believe it's an issue that needs further discussion, and I don't think we should make that decision at this moment in time.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we've done both of them, haven't we? Have we done both? Yes. Right. I now thank you all very much. Sorry it's been such a long meeting. I now close the meeting. Thank you very much.